This today is going to be the Ju Ju Baetis, or the Ju Ju B. Is what this pattern is called, and it's obviously a Baetis nymph. I'm going to be tying this today on a fire hole 317, size 14. You can see I've got the hook already in my vise and ready to go. And you also probably noticed that I've got this on this downward trajectory, and that's because we're going to go pretty far around the bend of the hook. So this is going to be one of those where I just reposition the fly as I get closer to the top here and tie some material in. But we're going to start out with white thread. We will switch our thread as we finish off this fly, but I'll take it to about where I know I'm going to want that thorax to begin, and where I want my abdomen to end. I don't want to get this overly thick here. I do have a few materials that we're going to tie on here, so I do have my thread secured to the hook at this point, so I can go ahead and come on in with my scissors and we'll just clip that little bit of excess off. We're going to be tying in a short little tail, and we're going to be using just some Indian saddle hackle here in a brown color. So we're going to pull those fibers from this Indian saddle pretty much perpendicular. I've got the tips aligned. I've got some smaller, shorter pieces in there, but that's okay. I'll follow up and clean those out, and I'm just going to strip those like that right off of the stem of the feather. And then I'm going to just make sure I keep those tips in alignment, switching fingers back and forth until I get to a point where I can look at it fairly closely. Say, look at my length. I've got my length just about where I want it, right there, knowing this is going to fold over the back of the hook. So I'm now going to go ahead and switch hands and pinch and make this very first turn. So I'll take a look at the length here on these, and you know, I'm good with where we are there. So I'm going to try to use really good thread control today as much as I possibly can. I want to keep this thread fairly tight, or fairly flat, as we work this down around the bend of the hook a little bit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take this thread back up to about where I want the abdomen to end and the thorax to start. And I'm just going to keep those fibers in place here, just to allow that bulk, the added bulk, take advantage of that, because it will be this will be tapered a little bit skinnier at the bottom and a little bit thicker the closer we get to the top. So we've got our fibers kind of tied in there, and we will just come on in with our scissors, make that cut. That is now securely in place. So I'm not too worried about cleaning up the ends there, because we will be tying on some other materials and when we get back there. But one thing that I am trying to do is constantly spin my thread a little bit counterclockwise, just because it helps flatten it out. It kind of unwinds that thread a little bit and helps us get a little bit of a flatter body. So there we are, right there. From there, we're actually going to be using a new material today, which is a superhair or supreme hair. It kind of looks like this, and we're actually going to use 3 strands of this. This one is sort of a fluorescent green color, and that's why we're doing a white underbody here, by the way, because that's going to help this material kind of show up even a little bit better. I'll just pull that one of those fibers off here, and then I'll pull off another one. So we're going to put a black one in there as well. So I've got some of the blacks, same material, it's just in black, this super hair. So these fibers are they're pretty long, so you do have a lot of forgiveness here. But I will go ahead and take the opportunity here to just go ahead and pull these 2 up a little bit more to be closer to the length of the other one. And once I've done that, I'm just going to pinch them into my fingers. We're going to grab our scissors and cut off a nice just square butt end for these here. And again, I've got enough length to work with here that I'm not overly worried about cutting off too much, but I'm also not just going to be completely reckless with it. So now I've got my 3 super hair fibers there. I'm going to go ahead and tie these in. We'll just go ahead and tie that all the way up to where we'll have this thorax begin, the abdomen end. So I've got those in place. We're now going to, this is where we're going to do some thread work. So we're going to try to take touching wraps as much as we can, because one of the keys here to tying this material on is to have a very smooth underbody. The white thread again will just help the color of these super hairs to really pop, because we'll be using some UV resin on it. So I will take my time here, because I really do want to build this pretty smooth underbody here. And you'll see, as I usually do, turning my vise a little bit just so that I can see it better. I know you can't see it better, but I'll try to flip it up from time to time like that and show you kind of where we are. And so I'm going to take this back all the way back down to where I want the abdomen to begin here. And I'm not going to take many wraps back there because that's where I want it to be the thinnest. So now we're just going to start traveling back up the shank of the hook here. And this is where we're going to work on our taper. So hopefully you can see here, I've gone ahead and taken my time to try to build not only a taper but a nice smooth body here. And we're about where I want to be. I'll go ahead and put my bodkin down at this point, and I'm going to grab my whip finisher because we're going to just want to throw this thread out of the way with our bobbin cradle here. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw in a couple of wraps here, which just basically is going to put a knot in that thread to make sure it just doesn't come unwound on us while we let go. And I'll just turn my bobbin cradle up into position so that I can hang my thread there. I'm going to grab these 3 strands of super hair. And this is kind of, for me, the tricky part is we want to keep these strands right together. So it takes a little bit of an effort of kind of wiggling it back and forth. And you want to kind of hold it really fairly close to, you'll see that I'm pinching very close to the hook itself with each of these wraps. And that just helps me make sure that I keep those kind of in alignment as we move up the shank of the hook here. So again, it's not that this is a really difficult pattern so much as it is you've got to be patient enough to not let things kind of get out of control. So you do have to be patient enough to make sure you get a nice taper, a smooth taper on the underbody with your white thread. You want to be very careful as you're tying up your super hair here that you don't get them all spread, an inch apart from one another and end up with a body that, really is not cohesive or does not show any of that ribbing. So this is going to be a fairly light color when we're finished because of the white underbody, and we use 2 strands of the fluorescent green and only 1 strand of the black. And you'll be seeing as we're kind of moving up here, that black does kind of create a little stripe as we're kind of moving our way up. You can see how quickly that can turn on you, which is okay. I'll just back up a little bit. That's all it takes. I'm actually in the vicinity right now of where the thorax is going to be, so I'm not as concerned. Because I know I'm going to be tying over the top of this material here. We're going to go ahead and release our thread off of our bobbin cradle, tighten it up a little bit here, and then I'm going to take some wraps. my thread is pulled back towards the bend of the hook and my super hair is towards the eye of the hook. That means that each one of these wraps is going over the top of the super hair. Once I've got a few wraps in like that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it. And I'm just going to secure it with a few additional wraps here. Basically, I'm tying over the top of that super hair. And from there, I can actually reach now in with my scissors, and we'll just go ahead and cut the super hair off. Thank you, super hair. You are very nice to us today, so far. From here, I'm going to go ahead and whip finish. Again, should just call it whipping, because most often I'm not finishing, I'm just whipping. So we'll put in a few thread wraps here. Just like that, my white thread is now secure. And we're doing that because at this point we're going to go ahead and make a transition, and we're going to transition to a black thread. So I put that whip finish in so that I can go ahead and cut the white thread out, just like that. Again, that was something when I started tying, I thought, oh, you never do that. You can't cut your thread off. Or move the hook, which is the other thing that I'm about ready to do, because I do now want more of an upward or parallel angle on this pattern. So I can go ahead now, and you can see I've just shifted that up. And I'm just going to go ahead now and I'm going to grab my black thread and get it started. And we'll just go ahead and get it started right behind the eye of the hook here and start bringing it up towards the back. And you'll see now now you'll see what I mean a little bit in terms of the fact that we're now covering up some of those last thread wraps, because we're going to start building our abdomen or our thorax at this point. So I've got my thread secure. I've got my transition now from white thread to black thread, which is what I wanted to do. We are going to tie in a piece of pearl tinsel in medium size right here, and maybe I'll explain why somewhere along the way here, but I just learned why a few minutes ago. So I tied one of these up just a few minutes ago, and you'll see we're going to put on some polar flash for the wing case that will also serve as the kind of wings, legs flying backwards. What I found a minute ago when I forgot to tie in the pearl tinsel is when I put my UV resin on, I could no longer see the white polar tinsel or the white polar flash. So I was like, oh, that's why. So this will help it pop as well when we put our UV resin on. So we've got that in place, centered over the top of the hook, so hopefully you can see that. I'm just sitting there ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and grab this material. So this is going to be our polar flash, and it is a little bit finer than what your normal flash is going to be. And you do want to, it may not hurt for you the first few times that you tie this on to actually count the number of fibers, because you really only want somewhere between 12 to 14 fibers, and it's hard to tell how many 12 to 14 fibers are unless you count them out. I'm not counting them out here. Once you've done that a few times, you start to get an idea of, oh, okay, that's about the thickness, or that's about right. So here we are with our material. I haven't cut it off yet, but that's going to be our wing case, and it's also going to be our legs. So I'll just keep that firmly pinched between my thumb and my forefinger there. And we're just going to come right in with our scissors, and we're going to clip that straight off, just like that. And I can go ahead and put that to the side, and I've got my little bunch of my polar flash in place. So we're going to tie it in place as well. We want this on the top of the shank of the hook. We're going to crank our thread counterclockwise. You just saw what happens when you don't do that. The thread wants to go over the eye of the hook, and I want it to go back towards my fingers, just like that. So I'm going to take a wrap or two. This stuff is plenty slippery. Again, I want to keep it on top of the shank of the hook here. I'm just going to take a few thread wraps like that, and then like I've done before, I'm just going to draw this material back so it's not over the eye of the hook, and I've got enough thread wraps in place that it's not going to come off either. Then I'm just going to move forward, clean that up a little bit. You can see by just throwing in a couple of thread wraps first, going back up towards the bend of the hook, you're able to have enough thread wraps in place that you can actually pull the material backwards, draw it back, and you don't end up having to cut it off a second time. So from here, I've pretty much got my fly where I want it, our Ju Ju Bee. I've got my polar flash on my fingers now. I'm going to pull that forward over the eye of the hook, and I'm going to just take one wrap and set that in place like that, just so that I can make sure I've got it where I want. You can take a look there from the lens side and see, okay, yes, I've got that where I want it, right over the top of the shank of the hook here. I'm going to take a couple more wraps now to just kind of lock this in place. I'm going to pull it backwards even, and take a couple of wraps right around the eye of the hook here, just about an equal bunch on either side. I'm going to take the fibers that are closest to the lens here, that I'm sure I'm covering up the camera with my fingers. I actually have a couple more there that I want to get. There we go. So I've got those. They'll stay bunched up pretty well together. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a few turns and attach these to make sure that they stay on the lens side of the shaft of this hook. And then I'm going to take the balance of the material and I'm going to pull it backwards as well, but on my side of the hook, so that when we're finished, we end up with something that looks kind of like that, where we have, you know, a group of wings coming out either side of the eye of the hook there, on either side of the hook. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull my tinsel, my pearl tinsel, over the top of the hook here, and that's going to cover up the wing case. But it'll also protect it as we do this UV resin and make it so you can actually see that color, the whiter color of the polar flash. So I'm going to take a couple of wraps there. I'm going to pull my tinsel backwards a little bit, take a couple of wraps under it, and then I'm going to go ahead and clip that off. And then we will work on tidying up a little bit before we turn to our work with our resin. Now I'm going to grab my whip finisher and we will go ahead and take the 4 or 5 turn whip finish towards the back here, not towards the eye. I've already got plenty of thread towards the eye. Then we're going to let that off. I'm going to pull my thread a little bit backwards. I'll pull it a little bit tight so we have that in position. And now I can come in with my scissors and I can clip off clip my thread off. We're done with that. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to take these wings here, and I'm going to pull both bunches together in my hand and pull them fairly tight. And I want them about half the length of the body. So I'm moving my scissors up about half the length, and then I'm just snipping, just like that. I don't know who you are, but you're not invited. And so here you go. There's our pretty much our fly at this point. So we're just going to use our Loon UV clear. I use the thin here on this pattern, and I've got my expensive trusty sewing needle that I use for this kind of work. I'm going to let that resin drip down on the hook there, or the needle here a little bit. And I'm going to be really fairly gentle with it. And we're going to start working our magic by taking that drop and kind of letting it go down the back end here of the hook, down by the tail fibers. And then I'll just go ahead and this is going to be a multi-part kind of operation here, and we're going to put just a little bit more on here up towards that top. You can see I've got a pretty big drip there, which is fine with me, because I want to work some of that around the sides on either side, and this is where it's where it's important to have those wings spread out a little bit so they don't get resin all over them and then get kind of clumped together. Go ahead and turn it upside down with our rotating vise, and we're going to put some of this resin on the bottom side as well. So get a little bit of resin on here again. And if I feel like I have a bit too much on it, I'll just go ahead and I'll wipe it off with my fingers a little bit. And then just run it over the material. I may even flip it around, let gravity do its work. I think I've got a pretty good coat there on the bottom. And we'll put a little bit on the head, and on the bottom, on the top and the bottom of the head. So I'll make sure I get some there, and then that I get some on either side here of that head. And make sure we get a nice movement from the head back to that pearl tinsel there, so we don't end up with too much of a gap there. Now I can go ahead and pull those wings back a little bit, and that is the Ju Ju Baetis, or the Ju Ju Bee. It's a great pattern to fish with, and just like all the flies that I tie, you tie, anyone ties, there are 100 variations to this. I can vary this by the color that I want to use for the superhair, because it does come in a variety of colors. I've got red, and blue, and yellow, and black, and brown, and everything. And you can significantly change the look of the pattern. You can see here is another one that I tied with more of a brown look, or a brown and black rather than green and black. So just that quickly you're able to change the way that this fly looks. So throw a hook in your vise and give this one a shot.